you mind giving a quick intro to who you are and how you got to O2X? And
Sure, thanks, Ellie. Yes, I've been working with O2X for a couple years now. Adam LaRue, one of the co-founders, is one of my best friends. And when he asked me to be involved, I was excited and honored. And I think it's really cool to see where the company has gone in the last couple of years. And I'm really excited to be part of it and to be supporting first responders. And we can see, especially now, how important these individuals are to our society. And so in a small way, to know that I can give back a little bit with the experiences I've had in the military and as a Paralympic athlete has been really, really good for me personally. I met Adam through the Navy SEAL community. We both were SEAL officers. I joined that community in 2002. I got through all of the training in 2003. I started doing some deployments, and then in 2009, I was severely injured in Afghanistan from stepping on a hidden bomb on a nighttime mission. And I went to Walter Reed Army Medical Center and Bethesda Naval Hospital for 2 years of physical therapy that was preceded by many surgeries. And that's where I met Annie, who was doing a lot of awesome work with wounded warriors there at Walter Reed. And after leaving the hospital environment, I got into Paralympic training full-time for the Paralympic Nordic ski team. And I've been doing that for 9 years now. And I've been to 2 Paralympic Winter Games.
All over, but Annie, do you mind giving a quick intro of yourself too?
Not at all. Thanks, Allie. So I've been a yoga teacher since '99 and started working at Walter Reed in 2006, working in the amputee department and literally just figuring out which way to practice yoga with various injury states. And then in 2009, I met Dan. And one of the things that really stands out to me from that, and it's no surprise to me really that your success in the Paralympic community and life in general boils down to this one statement. Literally, I remember he was coming out of the restroom, sorry, Dan, and I was cleaning some yoga mats, and I said, hey man, if you take up this space any longer, you're gonna have to do yoga with me. And he said, oh yes, ma'am. He said, everybody was always telling me that I need to try yoga. I'd love to try it. I am a triathlete. And at the time it was just continuous conversation, and we planned to practice the next day, which we did. But the reality is that Dan really changed a lot of the way I work in this community with injured service members, active duty service members, anybody with any form of injury state, as well as the unseen injuries that are accompanying that type of work of, PTS, combat operational stress. And like Dan said, our first responders are in that space right now as well, was just this idea that to move forward. And from a yogic perspective, the idea is that I am, not I was, not I will be, but that I am. And so whenever I sort of begin to work in a new avenue, I always go back to what Dan said, and I am. And it's really guided me in a lot of ways. And so I'm really blessed to work with O2X. Dan was kind enough to recommend me to Adam and to the community. And so here I am.
There you go. Perfect. Well, I'm glad you're both part of our team, because I have learned a lot from both of you. Kind of, you both alluded to that the first responders are under a lot of stress, and I think part of it is that there's not necessarily an end in sight from what we can tell. It's just kind of, we know there's a lot of uncertainty, and not something that either of you are totally unfamiliar with. That idea of like, this is where we are, what do we do about it? And kind of not thinking this is where we will be next week, next month, because we don't really know that. But Dan, kind of from your perspective and through your training and goal setting, how might you help people kind of approach this point of time where we like don't necessarily know what the future holds, but it's still really important to kind of set goals, and how do you even start to look at that?
It's a great question. It's something that I was faced when I was injured, not knowing whether I would ever be able to walk again or run again, whether my life would be exclusively in a wheelchair or what it would look like. And I had long-term goals that included walking and running, but I didn't know if they were possible. And when I was laying in the hospital bed, think about them for any stretch of time would only result in discouragement because I couldn't associate timelines with these events. I didn't even know if they were possible. They were so distant, so far away. And that maybe if I had set timelines with them, that would have only resulted in discouragement as well. Because maybe my goal was to walk a year from now, and then a year comes out and I had some setbacks along the way and it just didn't happen. And then you can really become crestfallen if that happens. So I think naturally I understood that and just had set some very long-term goals that were organic and innate, and they sustained me, but they were on the back burner. The thing that I learned in military training in Hell Week, which is the kind of crucible week to become a Navy SEAL, it's just 1 week out of many months of training, but it is a pretty big week. But I learned there that the best way to block out the long-term thoughts of the future, which can only be discouraging when you're under extreme pressure, stress, sleep deprivation, pain, or in the case of my injury, grief and loss, is to focus on the task at hand, what you actually need to do in that moment. That it means to prioritize and rigorously focus on what you actually need to do right now. And in the beginning days in the hospital, when the pain was really bad, a lot of times for me, it was just the focus was to get through the next 5 minutes, the next minute. I had those long-term goals and they sustained me, but they were on the back burner, as I said, because to think about them would have only been discouraging. And I couldn't put a timeline to it. I didn't know dates or possibilities. So the best way to focus on the task at hand is to rigorously just bring yourself back to it. Like those long-term thoughts, they don't matter. They don't pertain, because the only thing you can control is right now. It's something that I think about when I'm racing. I can't control 5 minutes from now. And what happened 5 minutes ago is in the past and it no longer exists. So the only thing I can actually do is attack this very second of like this very moment of time. And so I hope that way of looking at things can help people in this uncertain time when we don't know when this is getting, it very likely will not have just some sort of all of a sudden tomorrow everything is normal. It's not going to really be like that. And so there is an uncertainty, and we might be with this for a year or 2 years, or who knows. And so really the only thing you can do is just focus on one day at a time. And my mindset in the beginning after my injury was do what it takes to get through today to make it to tomorrow, and then focus on tomorrow when you get there.
Yeah. And Anna, you've been teaching daily classes for people and sort of remotely, and are getting people coming, I'm sure, myself included, to your classes in such various states of like, some people are okay with what's going on. Some people are like in that day-to-day kind of, this is where we are. And then some people are thinking, you know, a year ahead and in that sort of anxiety provoking mode. How are you kind of approaching that and like teaching people to kind of take Dan's approach of, hey, this is where we are. This is how we do things and what we have to focus on.
I'm exactly with Dan, that the reality is the present moment awareness. And for my perspective, it's noticing my breath. So if I'm launching off into, well, you know, what is my son going to have to do to get back into school and get the rhythm of all of that and the stresses of how are we paying bills and those kinds of things, the reality that everybody's facing, you just going to whip yourself into a frenzy and lose any literal grip of the moment, of grip of reality. And so in my work, I just always come back to the breath and being really kind. You know, Dan sort of expressed so many different experiences there, the grief, the loss, the what's going to happen, how am I going to get there, when am I going to be at that, when am I going to attain that goal. And all of us go through a wide range of almost sometimes every emotion every day. And anything that brings you back to that present moment is huge. I'm all about breathing. And in all honesty, like I had my day the other day of just, oh my Lord, when are we going to be done with this? And working with people and hearing stories and kind of taking on a lot of information and stress that wasn't necessarily mine. But, I was practicing and I laid down on the floor and I had my favorite wool blanket over me. And then the reality was, I'm just going to put that blanket over my head. And I did my breathing practice under my blanket for a few minutes. And it was kind of like a kid being in my blanket fort. And honestly, in that moment, in that present moment, it's exactly what I needed. I needed to check out from everything that was going on around the house, but also check out to be able to check in. And I think that's a big thing is the faster we're running to and panicky and nervous, we lose every grip on the present moment. So as Dan said, always coming back, always coming back. And I like to add the piece, especially with strong people, be gentle. Our minds are fighting a lot right now that we can't even see. And the reality is that if we're also fighting in our own thoughts, we're just creating more fight. So there's a point where the balance has to come back to being gentle and being okay with how we're feeling. Like we wouldn't tell our kids, oh my gosh, just suck it up, you're going to be fine. We're going to be a little more gentle. And I think we need to remember to do that for ourselves as well.
Yeah. Dan, I think in terms of kind of like shifting to in how you use a lot of these skills translate into your like sport performance too. And I think Annie mentioned breathing, and I saw you kind of nodding your head. I would imagine it, as a biathlete, breathing comes into play like pretty significantly, and being in the present moment. Are there things that you learned from your work with Annie that you've brought into your sport performance now too?
Yes, absolutely. When Annie talks about breath, it really resonates with me. I remember her talking about it years and years ago. And then I got into biathlon, which is this cool sport that not a lot of people know about, but it combines cross-country skiing with precision target shooting. So you have this really cool blend of power and endurance, stamina that goes with cross-country skiing, with all of a sudden having to stop and do something really precise under pressure while you're breathing really hard to hit shots, and then get back up and go hard, ski again another lap, for 7 to 10 minutes, and then come back again, stop, shut things down, and control your breathing and hit the shots. And so I've been working with sports psychologists. I've also taken on a little bit of a mindfulness practice of my own, and have found that really does ground me, and that there are many benefits that apply in my life beyond just racing. And then I think that it's a way to just kind of take time to do the one thing in this next minute. I don't need to eat. I don't need to drink water. I don't need to do anything. But if I hold my breath in about a minute, I'm going to really realize that this is the one thing that I need to be actually doing right now. It's so fundamental, and yet we take it for granted, but it yet has this amazing ability to kind of ground us. And you can also develop a pretty keen sense of awareness of your own body, and this cultivates this kind of ability to be in the moment, which is, it's kind of easy to say like, oh, just be in the moment. Like the best way to block out the long-term thoughts of the future, which can only be discouraging, is just to focus on the task at hand, like what you need to do today. But the mind starts wandering. But the best way to train for this, I think, is to meditate and to focus on the breath. And the moment your mind starts to wander, you bring it back. And this absolutely is useful as a biathlete, because when I'm having to lay down on the range and shoot shots, and you want to shoot quicker because the clock is ticking, but you also want to shoot accurately. You can't rush it too fast. But all these distractions, other athletes skiing by, announcers saying things, they can all take your mind other places, but you have to focus on the mechanics of shooting. And so meditation was a way for me to just practice that, because when you do focus on the breath, your mind is going to wander. The moment you notice that, you just bring it back. It's not a judgment, because the mind will wander, and it's not like you're failing. It's just, you just bring it back. And so that has been super useful for many reasons for me, in times of stress, and also, for visualization practices, as well as just cultivating that ability to kind of to recenter and focus the mind, and also know when your mind is wandering. So I think this is a really cool thing that people could be doing, and for just a couple minutes a day, you can just kind of sit and breathe and just observe your body, mechanics of breathing. Annie can talk much more in depth about this than I can, but as a practitioner, I've found it to be very useful.
Yeah, Annie, for someone who's never, or maybe when you were teaching Dan to do this, many years ago, what does that look like to teach someone who's maybe never really done it consciously or really thought about practicing their breathing as an actual tool to use?
It can be kind of interesting to people. Almost a bit of a light bulb goes off, because the way I usually describe it is that the body knows how to breathe itself. We're good at that. But when we actually physically take control of our body, of our breathing, we're actually taking control of the nervous system. And all of us have a nervous system. People's nervous systems are calibrated at different heights and rates. And especially in the community that we're talking about, nervous systems are pretty jacked, and I'm grateful they're working hard that way, because it means that they're ready to pop into action for other people's behalf at a moment's notice. But the reality is that when this tactical athlete, or anyone, any human being, decides, okay, it's time to go to sleep, or it's time to rest and be a little more low key about things, that recalibration sometimes is really challenging, and that's perfect. It's absolutely natural. That's the great thing, is this is not something that you did wrong. It's the way your world and your work is in the moment. But the reality is to find rest, which we know, and sleep, which we know are incredibly important for the health of the body and the mind. We need to be able to come back down and recalibrate. And so just noticing that maybe your exhale's short, or you're kind of jacked up. If you engage your exhale to slow down a little bit more than the length of your inhale, you are recalibrating the nervous system naturally and finding that parasympathetic nervous system response, which is our body's natural ability for rest and digest. And it's such a powerful tool. I think kids kids just will do it naturally sometimes, and they flop. And adults would kind of hold it together a little bit stronger or better. Maybe not better, but that's what we do. And the reality is that all of us need to slow down a little bit. And using what we already have, it's really actually very empowering to people to know that they can manage their own nervous systems and manage their own experience in a present moment.
I think I read an article recently about everything that people are experiencing right now is actually like a cycle of grief, basically, and that idea of disappointment and kind of how to get through those times, and be curious if either of you guys have thoughts on like what we can tell people who are maybe disappointed at or kind of dealing with the same thing that you had with the season cut short, on how they can approach sort of their training so that when things do kick back on, they're like in a more resilient, kind of stronger place than they were when they ended their season, or whatever they may have ended early.
I can jump in and take a stab. I think for me, when I think about resilience, which is the ability to kind of persevere through difficult situations, I think goal setting absolutely is a framework that kind of underpins resilience. But I think back that up one step, and first have to just have acceptance. And so just accepting that this is the way things are, like truly accepting it. And then from there you have adaptation. And then from there, I think you can start working on the goal setting, which is something that I've had the privilege of teaching some of the first responders at O2X. And I really love talking about goal setting, because it really helped me get through difficult times. And it starts with kind of the long-term goal, or you're thinking about your legacy, but then, from there you kind of, you build some long-term goals, but you don't associate timelines with them, because often it's too far out, and you don't really want to set timelines necessarily to these long-term ideas and quests that may or may not be possible with the given timeline so just kind of just thinking though about where you want to be, and then going from there into the kind of the midterm space and coming up with some more concrete action plans that you may want to, think about putting timelines with. And then from there to the daily or weekly goals that you absolutely are putting time, this is what I want to work on this week or today. And then you can even have micro goals like this morning, I want to work on this or that. And with the firefighters, we break out their a performance training plan that I used to set goals as an athlete, where I break the different components of my sport. Because it's not enough just to say, I want to be faster. I want to be a faster cross country skier. Well, okay, how do you do that? Okay, we're going to there's physical conditioning, there's equipment issues, there's mental performance, there's teamwork and cohesion, there are nutritional aspects of that, physiological aspects. So you're kind of breaking down the components of success, and within each of those components, you're identifying some strengths and weaknesses, things to work on, and then also some goals in the both, long term to the mid and short term. And I think this really helps structure goal setting for a higher form of performance.
Yeah, I think we're in the point of time where that daily, the micro goals are pretty helpful right now. Like, yeah. The micro goal is to wake up and get a workout in, and it's kind of before we think about the longer term ones. Definitely.
Can I pipe back to something Dan said a minute ago about the idea that I've heard a lot of my students coming back to me with the sadness and the grief of everything's different, and we're never going to be like that again, and what are we going to be like that way? I think in my own work with loss and grief, it's felt like there's no way to do it wrong, and I always feel like I need to caveat that, like, we're not going to start smoking crack, we're not going to drink a bottle of Jack every day. We know those are not good things to do, but just to clarify that. And I think that's where, if we start looking at mindfulness and meditation and just a 5-minute tactical pause of noticing the breath, it's the recalibration that kind of guides us back to, what's my micro goal for the day? Okay, what's next week? What do I need to do this week to support next week? And just because we're maybe in more confined space doesn't mean we don't have goals. And it doesn't mean that things are rosy and peachy. It just means we're recalibrating the whole mechanism of the way we are. And there's sadness in that. And I think part of meditation, in my own experience and what I've shared and heard feedback from others, is that when you welcome the moment, you're kind of welcoming yourself right where you are. And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be anxious, and use the tools that you have. So I felt that was kind of important to say there's no way to do it wrong within reason.
No, I'm kind of curious as far as what your learning is from this whole experience, and sort of what your 1% is at the end of all of this, kind of what you're focusing on for yourselves right now.
When I was going through Walter Reed 10 years ago, and as someone who had just lost his own legs and didn't know what the rest of life was going to look like, I was surrounded in Walter Reed by dozens of service members, some of whom were missing 3 and in some cases 4 limbs. And looking over at the therapy table next to me and seeing a triple amputee working as hard as he or she could that day to make their life better, it was really hard for me to feel sorry about my own situation. And this kind of leads into perspective. I also knew that there are many families out there that would give anything for their loved one to be just alive, or just missing 2 legs, but alive. And it's not to say that the perspective just let me feel better about my situation because others had it worse. It's just to focus on the unique circumstances for which I should be and am grateful, and to focus on what I have and not what I don't have. And so there's kind of, I think, a way that you can incorporate this concept of perspective and gratitude in your life and focus on what you have. And for many people, it's, you know, the chance to be closer to your family, maybe in some cases a little too close, but to be thankful of it as being, you know, close and with the people that you love, or the chance to get outside every day, or just to reframe things instead of what you've lost and say what I still have. And of course, there's always people who have it worse, and it doesn't mean you have to focus on their tragedies to feel better about yourself, but it is to just take time to be appreciative of what you have.
Totally agree with the gratitude practice. That's if we want to look at it technically, we're rewiring the brain in with gratitude, and taking a moment to be grateful for what we have literally rewires the brain, and it emits the same hormones that smoking crack and having addiction issues. It fires up that same neural pathway. So again, here we are. Let's go with gratitude instead of crack. But you know, I agree with Dan. Just being grateful for where you are and what you have.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal thing to leave people with, is that idea of just acknowledging what's good every day, and there's always something, whether it's big or small, right?